Okay, I think we will go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Karen Smith. I'm the Executive Director with Leadership Macomb. And helping me out today are Julie Petkoff, the Program Manager for Leadership Macomb, and Isabella Crook, our Social Media Coordinator. And for those of you that don't know, Leadership Macomb started in 1996, and since then we've had over 1,100 individuals graduate from our Leadership Macomb core program. And as most of you know, because of COVID, this past year we were unable to have our in-person sessions, but we wanted to stay true to our mission of educating and connecting leaders on relevant topics. So we developed a 10-part virtual series, and today's session is already the 8th in our series, and we're going to be focusing on natural resources in Macomb County, in particular, the gem we have in Lake St. Clair. I want to thank our series sponsors, Macomb Community College, Henry Ford Macomb Hospital, Marchand Advisory Group, DTE, Oakland University, Plant Moran, and First State Bank. Our facilitator today is Terry Gibb, and she is a graduate of Leadership Macomb and also sits on the Leadership Macomb board. And for the past, maybe 20 years or so, has been chairing our environmental session. Terry works for Michigan State University Extension and is our knowledge source for everything having to do with natural resources. She's been a very avid supporter of Leadership Macomb, and we're very grateful that she shares her knowledge and experience with us. We're so happy to have her here today, chairing today's session. And we wouldn't be able to have series like this if we didn't have our sponsors. And today we want to specifically thank DTE for being a generous supporter. Meg Gilliman is a Leadership Macomb graduate and a current board member, and she is also a current plant manager with DTE, and she's joining us today to say a few words. Meg?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Karen. I'm very happy to be here today representing DTE and happy to be a supporter of Leadership Macomb. It's really important for me that DTE supports organizations like Leadership Macomb because engaging leaders and creating better relationships and understanding the communities, especially communities where DTE serves the public in places like Macomb County that has so many amazing characteristics, is really important to our long-term success as a company. And as an energy company, we understand that the work we do impacts our environment. And DTE is committed to cutting our carbon emissions by 80% by 2040, which we're well on the way to achieve, as well as setting a goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. We're also the largest investor in and producer of renewable energy in the state of Michigan. We recently announced addition of 3 new wind parks, really over the last 2 weeks. And yesterday, we announced the completion of a solar array project on the rooftop of a parking garage at Ford's Dearborn campus to support EV charging at their facility. We're also nearing an early 2022 commissioning of a state-of-the-art natural gas combined cycle plant, Blue Water Energy Center, that will provide enough baseload energy to power almost 750,000 homes with significantly less emissions than our coal facilities, which we're working towards retiring. We want to be part of creating a cleaner and healthier environment so we can continue enjoying our wonderful natural resources like Lake St. Clair that we're going to learn about today. So we always have a packed agenda on Energy and Environment Day, and today's not any different. So I'll throw it over to Terry to get us all started. And thanks for letting me be here.
Great. Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Karen. And thanks to all of you for being here. As they mentioned, I am Terry Gibb. I'm an extension educator at Michigan State University Extension. I've actually been working in the natural resources field for over 40 years. And to answer Karen's thought, I've actually been working on the Environment Day with Leadership Macomb since it started in 2000. So I guess 21 years, but since we didn't have one last year, 20. So we think we've got a really interesting and informative program for for you today with some really great speakers. But we're going to do it in a very condensed time. Normally, about this time, we would be at DTE having a tour of Bell River, the power plant, after having been to a landfill or a wastewater treatment plant, all sorts of great things. But today, we're focusing just on water. And water is a very important part of Macomb County, physically, socially, economically, and environmentally. Macomb has 32 miles of Lake St. Clair shoreline. Over 60% of the Clinton River watershed flows through our county. And then there is the Lake St. Clair drainage basin. We also have lots of pressures on these resources. We are the 3rd largest county in population in the state. And yet at the same time, we are the 9th smallest in land area, which creates pressures all of its own. So today's speakers are going to talk about some of these issues and opportunities. Now, because of the condensed time, the speakers will not be taking any questions during their presentation. So please put all of your questions in the chat. We're going to do them at the end. We've allowed time for questions and answers. We're going to do as many as we can. And if we have a lot, we'll collect those questions and see if we can get our speakers to answer them and then do a follow-up email out to you. So how we're going to start today is we're going to start off with a brief overview of Lake St. Clair and its connecting waterways. So our first speaker is Julie Champion, and Julie is the East District Interpretive Supervisor based at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. She has been an interpretive naturalist for the Huron-Clinton Metro Parks for 42 years. She has worked at various nature centers within the park system and currently is the Eastern District Supervisor over Stony Creek Metro Park Nature Center and Lake St. Clair Nature Center. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in Fisheries and Wildlife and Environmental Education from MSU, yay Julie, and a second Bachelor of Science in Elementary Education from Oakland University. She is certified as an interpretive trainer through the Parks Association for Interpretation and has trained staff from various parks. As a park naturalist, she has presented natural resources programs and hikes for people of all ages in the parks and as an outreach to the community. And she's been involved in the Leadership Macomb program for a number of years. So Julie, if you want to pull your PowerPoint up, you can get started.
You can use or yeah, either one.
What do I do? Yeah. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for having me here today. And yeah, Terry always charges me with presenting a lot of information in a short amount of time. So, so what we'll do is a quick overview, kind of set the stage, I guess, for what the other folks will be talking about today. So, but what we want to look at is, I always say we like to kind of give ourselves a little sense of place of where are we in the bigger picture here and how it relates to everything else. So if we look at from a satellite at Big Great Lakes, obviously around Michigan, we can see the large lakes, and most of you know Lake St. Clair. We always say we're right at the base of the thumb there, but we're not called one of the good. I always call it my lake. It's not called one of the Great Lakes, but it is a part of the whole Great Lakes system, and so it connects everything. They do consider it a connecting channel in the whole Great Lakes basin. Very shallow, but a lot of water moves through from all those upper lakes on down through. And so one of the advantages of that is that there's a lot of circulation and quick flow through the water, but it carries the water on out to the St. Lawrence eventually. We also share Lake St. Clair, Macomb County does, with other counties in the US, but also with Canada
And as actually, I always say three nations actually, because we also share it with Wappo Island First Nation. And so when it comes to looking at water flow, water levels, land management, water issues, wildlife research, all of that occurs thinking about that all as a whole and how it all connects from the Huron down to Erie. So we do from Macomb have the Clinton River as the primary tributary going in, but St. Clair has the Bell River, Black River, you see some of the other rivers. Canada has the Thames and the Nam I would never knew how to pronounce that one exactly, but they all contribute. And then you see where the St. Clair River goes down into Lake St. Clair, all divides into many channels and lots of islands. We have a lot of bays and islands and deltas, really marshlands that are along the coast there. So it is all considered a kind of a management area would be the Huron to Erie corridor. And there's a great book, it's now online, it's not in print anymore, but it really does do it. The Biodiversity Atlas kind of describes a whole bit of the region. You can find it on the Army Corps website and go through chapter by chapter. And I think it's a good background book or information to have. But we look at it as a whole in terms of, like we said, the fisheries that you'll hear about later, the wildlife as it moves through. One other unique feature that we always like to claim as fame is our the freshwater delta where the St. Clair River comes into the lake. Again, bringing Lake Huron water, heavy flow, and then it hits this shallow area. Lake St. Clair can only be in many places only 10, 11 feet deep as an average. They say 10 feet deep. There's deeper areas down on the Canadian side, but only maybe 21 feet. But as it does that, it spreads out a lot of sand and soil brought down from the Huron and creates this delta that is up on the, would be the northeast side there. All the islands and the channels. But it is considered the largest freshwater delta in North America. And possibly worldwide. I think there's always discrepancy of what folks say. Where I'm sitting right now, of course, is on the left-hand side. There is that other peninsula sticking out where the Clinton River spills out, and then the lake or the park is to the south of that. But because of that ecology with the marshes and the wetlands along the shoreline, and the big delta marsh, which provides wonderful wildlife habitat, but it also is very unique in terms of obviously providing recreational opportunities for boating, fishing, wildlife viewing, but it also serves that function as all wetlands in terms of filtering, cleaning, stopping erosion, all those important parts of that. So a lot of the edges of Lake St. Clair would have been and actually, Terry mentioned the Clinton River watershed. This is kind of a map showing where it all comes from, all the way up to Lapeer County, Oxford on down, but it all ends up at Lake St. Clair here and along that peninsula. And at one time, if we went back in history to the 1800s, this is just Macomb County, and this is kind of also a nice feature showing what was here in the 1800s in terms of vegetation, and that tells us a little bit about the land and soils and topography. But right where that peninsula is, it was all marshland, shrub, swamp, but there is that little black feature that was on this, it says sand dunes. So there was a natural beach here at Lake St. Clair Metro Park, and then swampy woods just outside, so it's kind of a progression. And so it's all lake bottom or lake plain where we are, but then when we go out the farther north end of Macomb is where we get more in the glacial area. But Lake St. Clair, and to the right-hand side there, what the folks saw when they purchased the land for the park system was that sandy ridge. Obviously, they made it much larger and bigger. This photo is from the probably the early 50s when we opened up. But what I wanted to show is how much water is there. It would have been that little sandy ridge, and that would have been all marshland that we would have seen. So obviously it's been built on, and there's some changes there that does impact what happens. But we still have about 500 acres in Lake St. Clair Metro Park of those marshes and the wetlands. Another important feature is how we fall on the migratory bird flyways. I always compare this for children as they're like highways in the sky for the birds. And right where Lake St. Clair is located, there's two flyways that intersect. Birds that are going along the Atlantic Flyway and birds that are going along the Mississippi Flyway. And so it's a busy intersection, and is how I always describe busy intersection, and very important stop off, rest stop as birds are traveling along here. So it's a key migration stop off for underswans that nest way up in the Arctic, and they're heading over to Chesapeake Bay, and they stop off in the flats and in our marshlands and out in Lake St. Clair. And it's a wonderful sight to get to see that. Mostly in fall, we see them more. On the US side, it's the Canada side, we go look for them in March. But anyway, we have progression coming from those wetlands that they take advantage of with submerged floating plants and up through the wet meadows and shrubs up to the forest. So I kind of look at it from as we go in from the lake. The submerged beds, a real important plant out there. We have big weed beds of this wild celery plant, and which is native, and it's important excuse me, for those waterfowl as they're moving through. Particularly our canvasback ducks, probably 85% of the population moves through Lake St. Clair. And our Fish and Wildlife are always doing surveys and studies and banding. But they do one example, and I think it was December, late November, December, when these diving ducks come through. They do a flyover. They always do a flyover and kind of guesstimate population. And there was probably a 13-mile long raft of these birds floating out in Lake St. Clair. They can dive down the 10, 12 feet to get to vegetation on the bottom. We have, again, the shallowness, the bays, the places where they can get food and take advantage of diving in Lake St. Clair. Our shoreline with the beach, we have shorebirds that move through, again, from the Arctic all the way down to South America. Things are moving through and stopping off and using the natural areas that we have here. So, and then as we move in shoreline, we have a lot of the songbirds, warblers that take advantage of the shrubs and the vegetation in our marshes and in the different habitats that are available as they're moving through. Some common wildlife that can be seen, everybody's seen red-winged blackbirds and different types of ducks, like the blue-winged teal here. But we actually, because we have that rare and large expanse of wetlands, Cattail marshes on our shoreline, we also get some threatened and rare species that are breeding in the park here and up in the St. Clair Flats and some of the other marshland pockets that are around Lake St. Clair, like the least bittern. These are all the least bittern threatened species. Marsh wren and common gallinule are special concern. And so we're doing a lot of studies, research, bird banding, trying to evaluate those. Lake St. Clair, the marshes, again, the flats, also our shoreline is real important, and our great fisheries also sustains these birds too, but they are a lot of our tern species are threatened species, and they're doing well in Lake St. Clair area, but they're not so well in other areas. So there's a great deal of research actually on black terns up in the flats, foresters, common terns are nesting on the lighthouses, and there's a lot of research with them, banding to find out what their needs are. They really feel the common tern colony that has been established on the lighthouses now is the largest one in the Great Lakes. So, a lot of focus, a lot of research going on with a lot of the wildlife species that are typical or common that we can see, and even some of our reptiles and amphibians that are becoming rare need these marshes in the wetlands. Eastern fox snake is a threatened species we see here, but I know they're all up in St. Clair County. They're all along our shoreline from Erie, but it's all around Lake St. Clair is the only place this animal, this eastern fox snake, non-venomous, very calm, relaxed kind of a snake, but it gets 6 feet long, but they can swim well, but they are exclusive to our around Lake St. Clair and a little bit up in the St. Clair River, marshes, wetlands, shoreline. So looking at, we've done some things at the park to help with hibernaculum with those rocks, and then the landing shore is also a special concern that they use. We've created some areas for them to lay eggs and things like that. So we're trying very hard in all these areas to try to get the public out to trails. We have school classes that come out. We collaborate with MSU Extension and Michigan Sea Grant and we've almost 30 years now. Maybe Terry can remember the starting year of Great Lakes education program, trying to bring focus on the rivers, the watershed, and Lake St. Clair. So we use that, our boardwalks and that. And we also get folks out in the large canoe. That goes
Julie? Yeah. Julie, do you have a final thought?
Oh, okay. Yeah, come out and visit us. We can learn more about it. We go on our boat cruises in the summer, and we give people a chance to get out there. We're trying to explain a lot more about invasive species that are impacting that, and yeah, I get excited. There's too many neat things to talk about. So
I fully understand. So. Sorry to have to cut you off, but
no, this is my last slide. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Deanna Apps, and she's a physical scientist with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the Detroit district. She has worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for about 4 years and is the lead forecaster for Great Lakes water levels. She received her Bachelor's of Science degree in meteorology from SUNY Oswego and went on to complete her master's degree in geography from Michigan State University. Yes, this was all unplanned, folks. She grew up in upstate New York and was a frequent visitor to Lake Ontario before moving to Michigan, where she was able to travel to the rest of the Great Lakes. Deanna is going to talk to you today about water levels, historically and current, and the impact on the ecosystems and the economy. Thanks, Deanna.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Deanna Apps. I work in the hydraulics and hydrology office in the Army Corps of Engineers Detroit District. And I'll jump right in here to the monitoring Great Lakes water levels. So obviously the Great Lakes Basin is a very large system covering, land area in both the US and Canada. Water flows through the system, really beginning up in northern and Lake Superior, flowing through the St. Mary's River into Lakes Michigan and Huron, through the St. Clair River into Lake St. Clair, through the Detroit River into Lake Erie, Niagara River into Lake Ontario, and eventually out through the system through the St. Lawrence River. I like to note that there are 2 places in the system where outflows are regulated, and that's through the St. Mary's River between Lake Superior and Lake Michigan, Huron, and out of Lake Ontario through the St. Lawrence River. Regulation of these flows is the responsibility of the International Lake Superior Board of Control and the International Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River Board of Control, and that's all done through the authority of the International Joint Commission. However, I want to stress that the primary driver of water levels is weather and hydrologic conditions, and the ability to regulate outflows cannot fully prevent extreme high or low water levels, as we've seen in recent years. So when we monitor Great Lakes water levels, we use a network of water level gauges throughout the system. All the green dots are water level gauges operated on the Canadian side of the border. All of the blue dots are water level gauges operated on the US side of the border. All the bolded dots are the water level gauges we use in our daily average water level calculation. So we calculate a daily lake-wide average water level for each of the lakes. Lake Superior, Lakes Michigan, Huron, we consider as one lake due to the fact they're connected at the Straits of Mackinac, Lake St. Clair, Erie, and Ontario. And I've listed the gauges there below for each of the lakes and what gauges are used. You can see that each lake uses a different number of gauges to help calculate that lake-wide average water level. So on our website, you can access daily lake-wide average water levels as well as a graphic that shows the comparison between this year to last year. That also compares between the monthly averages as well as the monthly record highs and lows on each of the lakes. And that's represented on this graphic on the left. Because we are, focusing on that, Lake Huron to Lake Erie corridor, I did also want to bring up what happened recently in the Lake St. Clair system due to the ice jams we saw in early February. Early February of 2021, we saw very cold air move into the Great Lakes region. And as a result of that, we had ice jams develop in the St. Clair River. And due to that, you can see that with the ice restrictions upstream of Lake St. Clair, you can see the Lake St. Clair water level dipped and finally recovered once the ice jam was relieved, and later in February as warmer air moved into the region and the ice was able to break up. So I did want to touch briefly on that. And these are some of the photos of the impacts. I believe this one on the left is up near Marine City, and this one is further downstream as you're moving toward Algonac. So you can see that the ice buildup and caused a lot of flooding due to the already high lake levels. When we had those ice jams developed, there was some coastal flooding that impacted several homes and businesses along the shoreline in both the US and Canada. So next, I'm just going to transition here to some of the factors that impact water levels. As I mentioned earlier, weather and hydrologic conditions are really the primary drivers of water levels. And we track three main variables to do that. And that's precipitation over the lake, runoff to the lake, and evaporation off of the lake surface. And we term that net basin supply as really an estimate of the water supply to the lake, each day, week, month, whatever time period we're looking at. So on an annual basis, the water levels across all the Great Lakes go through a seasonal cycle, and that's in relation to the types of weather and conditions we're experiencing in the region. So in the winter is typically when we see the seasonal low in water levels. This is when the snow is accumulating and the ground is frozen typically. As we move into the spring months, we see increased temperature, which allows increased rainfall and runoff to occur as we go through the spring. And the summer is typically when we see the peak in water level. During the summer months, we see increased sunshine, which helps to warm the lake water. And that's very important as we head into the fall, because a primary driver of water level decline is evaporation. And evaporation occurs as cold air starts to move into the region and it's moving over that relatively warm lake surface. And that really can induce significant evaporation off of the lakes. So this is our full period of record of monthly mean water levels. So our monthly mean water level data set goes back to 1918. And we have that going through the last month, which was April 2021. So that's represented by the blue line. The red line is the long-term average annual level. Okay, and we have a graphic for each of the lakes, Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, St. Clair, Erie, and Ontario. Just by looking at this at a glance, you can see if let's say we're looking at Lake Michigan, Huron, for example, you can see clearly that there's been periods of both high and low water in the, over century plus period of record that we have. Most people clearly remember the decade plus of low water that existed in the late 1990s that, went till about 2013. But then since then, we've seen really a record rise in water levels. And although we've gone through that seasonal cycle every year, we've continued to trend upward, which eventually brought us to the record highs of 2019 and 2020 across the lakes. So why are these levels so high? And I've already alluded to this, but the persistent wet pattern we saw in the region, specifically in recent years. So this is annual Great Lakes Basin precipitation. This is a NOAA product, so it's only based on precipitation on the US side of the border. But what you can see here is that with this data set going back to 1895, you have your 100-year mean in the gray line across horizontally on this chart. You can really see that in recent years, we've seen more precipitation in the region, specifically 2017 to 2019. That was exceptionally wet in the Great Lakes region. Some locations experienced their record wettest year in 2018, followed by the record wettest year in 2019. And that's really what, brought those water levels to record highs. In 2020, you can see we've received less precipitation than recent years, but it was still above that 100-year average. And even more recently, what's happened in this last current month? I mean, really since the beginning of 2021, we've predominantly seen drier conditions in the Great Lakes region. And that was also true in April as well. You can see this precipitation graphic here on the left, most of Michigan highlighted in yellow, indicating precipitation in the range of 50 to 70% of average for the month of April, as well as this stream flow graphic here on the right. For the month of April, you can see most areas in this orange or red, especially in central and eastern portions of the basin, indicating stream flows much below normal, which stream flows are a good indication of runoff. So not only are we seeing less precipitation, we're also seeing below normal stream flows, which is, like I said, is a good indication of below normal runoff in the region as well. So finally, to the 6-month forecast. I'm going to just, for time's sake, I'm just going to show for Lakes Michigan, Huron, St. Clair, and Erie. Our 6-month forecasts are done at the beginning of every month, and they go out 6 months. So we do this at the beginning of May. This one stretches May through October. So we actually just finished this forecast yesterday. It's just on the website as of yesterday afternoon. A couple things I just want to point out on the graphics. These graphics are referenced to chart datum. So that 0 line is a reference level. And then the blue line is the blue dash line is the long-term average monthly levels. The red line is the observed monthly mean levels. And then you get to the forecast, which the forecast is the most probable is the green dash line. And then this band surrounding it represents a 90% probability range of water levels, given conditions could be wetter or drier over the next 6 months. So this graphic is particularly for Lake Michigan, Huron. You can see I pointed out here the record highs from last year on Lake Michigan, Huron. You can see January through August, we set monthly mean water level records on that lake. You can see this year we've experienced a much larger decline than we did last year. And that's really led to the lower water levels this year. We expect this lake to begin its seasonal rise here over the next month or so. And then forecasted to really be above average, but below record highs. So these horizontal lines with the years above them, those are the record highs for each month, and also the record lows there on the bottom. And so, we expect water levels to remain above average, but shouldn't be as high as last year, as is shown by the forecast. Lake St. Clair, also set records in 2019 and 2020, unlike Lake Michigan Huron, which only set records in 2020. The yellow rectangle here represents those records in 2019. However, you can see a lot of those records were reset in 2020. So in 2020, we saw records in January, March through June, August, and September. You can see we have also seen a pretty large decline in water levels this year. You can see that impact from the ice jam here and that drop in monthly mean water levels from January to February. However, that rebound occurring here from February to March. We expect this lake to continue or resume a seasonal rise here in the next couple months. But again, similar story. We expect, according to the most probable, to remain above average over the next 6 months, but below record highs from last year or 2019, and even October. That record is from 1986. And last but not least, Lake Erie. Again, this lake also set records in 2019 and 2020. again, it also did reset some records in 2020 that it did set in 2019, like the month of May, but set records in 2020, February through May, has also experienced, a larger than average seasonal decline due to those drier conditions we've seen over the recent months. And then again, the green dash line indicating water levels to remain above average over the next 6 months, but below those record highs we've seen in recent years. So that's where I'm going to end my presentation. This is a Great Lakes High Water webpage that is was created in our office, and it has a lot of great resources in here. If you frequently ask questions, a lot of people use the Living on the Coast booklet, which is a reference down here that helps with knowing what to do along shorelines given their coastal area that you live in. Just some other contact information as well. So my contact information is up here, and this is my supervisor, John Alice, his contact information as well. So with that, I will end and turn it over to the next speaker. Oops.
Thanks, Deanna. That was great. Our next speaker is Jerry Santoro. He is the Parks and Natural Resources Program Director with the Macomb County Planning and Economic Development Department. He provides support for projects, grants, and the administration of various levels of programming associated with our Blue Economy Initiative. Jerry is a certified planner with the American Planning Institute, and he has 18 years of experience in the professional planning occupation, the last 12 of which have been with Macomb County. He previously served as a research specialist and as an area manager for Silicon Valley-based ETAC digital maps. Once Jerry completed his graduate studies in urban planning, he made a transition to the professional planning occupation. He has commendations from the Michigan Association of Planning, Michigan Society of Planning, Flint River Watershed, and the Michigan Boating Industry Association. He's got a really interesting topic, and he's going to be talking about the historic submerged settlements in Lake St. Clair and their cultural significance. Jerry?
Okay, thank you, Terry, and good afternoon, everyone. I know a few of you online. So my presentation is more directly discussing what's under Lake St. Clair. It's about a little bit about the interaction between humankind and our natural environment and some of the consequences, and you'll see some relations to some of the other speaking engagements. But the primary reason why we're discussing this today is that there's a renewed interest in looking at some of these sites from an archaeological perspective to look at trying to find a state or federal designation for the bottomlands of Lake St. Clair for some of the reasons that I'm going to discuss right now. So can everyone see my presentation? Thumbs up. Okay, good. Thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the submerged settlements. There's two of them. There's one called St. Felicity Mission. That was an outpost of Father Gabriel Richard's mission to Detroit. Another one was the town of Belvedere, which was a trading post at the mouth of the Clinton River. Although the South Channel lighthouses are not under the water, they're a very important archaeological location. And then finally, we're going to talk about the Tuskegee Airmen and their importance at Selfridge Air National Guard Base. And we actually have a Tuskegee airplane that was crashed into Lake St. Clair that is of renewed interest recently. So this sort of shows you the locations in general terms. You can see the St. Felicity site's right about where St. Clair Shores Harrison Township border is. Belvedere site's just on the north side of the mouth of the Clinton River. Our historic lighthouses are at the old South Channel location. The most prominent sunken ship site is in the middle channel. We have actually a large ship down there that's completely submerged. And then the Tuskegee crash was located near Algonac, which is in the flats. So let's talk about the St. Felicity site first. So as we mentioned, this was an outpost mission in Lac St. Clair at the time. through Father Gabriel Richard, and it was predominantly for the Native Americans, the fur traders, and the French ribbon farmers that all sort of were populating the coast and along the shorelines of the Clinton River. And about the third generation of French ribbon farmers, Paul and Pelagia Rattel and their 5 children occupied the site where the mission church was actually located. Eventually, this included a chapel, a parsonage, several sheds, and a cemetery, and likely still includes the remains of Mr. and Mrs. Paul Rattel, possibly several missionary priests and any Native American converts. And this area was regularly inundated with coastal floodwater. So that sort of harkens already back to what our previous presentation about the change in water levels. But 1855 is a very important year. And notice I mentioned that for both of our sunken submerged sites, 1855 was the year that the St. Felicity site was permanently abandoned. And as we found out recently in our research, that 1855 represents the year that the St. Lawrence Seaway was channelized through the St. Clair River for shipping traffic. So basically it opened up a bigger volume of opportunity for water to come into Lake St. Clair until it met a new mean. And that new mean, we believe, is about 3 to 4 feet higher than it was traditionally, even with the fluctuating water levels. So that's sort of an interesting perspective. And we've also applied for a grant from the Michigan Coastal Zone Management Program through NOAA to finish this investigation of this particular site. So this is the approximate location. As you can see, it's all hardened shoreline now and completely developed, and it's probably offshore somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 feet. This is the storyboard that our department used. We've found all the other historic significant information up to this point from many different sources: national, federal, state, archdiocese, local knowledge. And I'm going to highlight just what a couple of those particulars were. So if you look at 1810, which is the earliest map we have of coastal Lake St. Clair with any land ownership, that shows us that the private claims of 316, 645, and 736 all ended up in Paul Rattel's French Ribbon Farm. And that is reflected in the 1859 map. You can see the Rattel family owns that particular large site there. And even as recent as 1949, with aerial imagery we get from Detroit Edison, it shows you, I should say DTE Energy, because we have a representative on our board. So, but there was a sandbar that came out, and it's reflected on the maps, earlier maps. Our new map does not show that. However, in 2020, you can still see a very shallow subsurface sandbar that still exists. Another really important find back in the 1960s was a young girl was playing out in front of her house with a cousin, stepped on something sharp, thought it was a Coke bottle, pulled it up, and she found this beautiful 9-inch statue of Our Lady of Sorrows, which was a very popular statue to put on the mission churches in the 1800s. So she still has that in her possession. She now lives in Oregon, but she talked to us and she gave us her explanation of it. So our lost village of Belvedere is another more well-known community that was platted in 1836, but 1882 had its last residence. However, in 1855, due to unprecedented flooding, most people fled that settlement. James Conger was the mastermind behind the settlement to a strategic location with shipping traffic through the Clinton River and Lake St. Clair and the Great Lakes in general. Once it was a functioning village with a couple dozen buildings with a bustling seaport, and was regularly inundated with coastal floodwaters. Once again, we see that. They had its own banknote at one point. It was important enough to have its own bank, and it was an outpost to fishing and hunting for Detroiters and nearby residents in Mount Clemens. All that remains today is a street named Belvedere and a bay named Conger. And here's actually some imagery in the later part of that, of one of the outposts. It was a fishing and hunting club. And you can see there was still some in 1875. And our earliest maps from the explorers, when they were platting the land for state of Michigan through the Jeffersonian plan, show Belvedere is an actual occupied village about the same size as Mount Clemens. And you can see it was a pretty aggressive development that met its demise pretty quickly. This is the general location. We will be doing some ground surveys underwater, subsurface, this coming year if we get funded with the Noble Odyssey Foundation and the Naval Sea Cadet Program. And you can see as late as 1949 remnants of that particular community with some of the lines still very representative were still visible in 1949. Even in our low water back in 2013-14, there was some of these visible once again. And that's just a close-up of the plat. Our South Channel lighthouses, I only mention this because they are very historically significant. They're the oldest, two of the oldest, or some of the oldest lighthouses in the entire Great Lakes. The North Lighthouse has been restored without innkeeper's house. However, the South Channel Light still is in desperate need of funding. This was commissioned through the Abraham Lincoln presidency and served as a channel marker to get in and out of the St. Clair River. These two lighthouses still exist. People who boat on the water generally see these are only accessible by boat, but they're off of the very southern point of Harson's Island. Now, finally, the Tuskegee airplane, they arrived at Selfridge Air National Guard Base in 1943, there was about 5 confirmed crashes during their trainings. A couple are in Lake Huron, one was in the St. Clair River, and of course, one is in the North Channel, not too far from the south end of Algonac, pretty close to where the ferry station is now. They were very important in our World War II efforts and predominantly came from Alabama. They moved up to Selfridge with a bigger airfield and then finally to Oscoda. Shipwrecks of the Great Lakes, this is my last slide. Basically, they estimate that there's about 6,000 shipwrecks and about 30,000 lives lost within the Great Lakes. When you consider all vessels, we're talking about other types of vessels like small, personal vessels, that number rises to over 25,000 and some of them unnumbered. So we really don't know 100% what's down there. So if you combine all the shipwrecks of the Great Lakes, they would have more shipwrecks than all the other bodies of water in the world combined. Now that's very important because that was the major form of trade between all of the interior cities of the North America, and since it was freshwater, they succumbed to shipwrecks more easily because they didn't have the buoyancy of the salt water that you compare it to, and because of that, we had lots of shoals, and that created just a remarkable amount of shipwrecks. Lake St. Clair has about 30 notable shipwrecks. You can even see this one submerged right in the middle channel near this one home, and it's visible when the water is pretty clear. So that's a pretty interesting perspective. So I just wanted to give you a perspective of what this represents and what we might expect in the near future. But I also want to let you know there's a lot of vehicles under the water because of prohibition. The traffic between to and from Canada was unbelievable. And a lot of these vehicles went through the water and never recovered. So little tidbits of history. take it for what it's worth. We got a lot going for our region, but this is one area that has not been really presented very well. So we're working on bringing this more into the forefront of people's knowledge. So thank you for your attention.
Great, thanks, Jerry. Good information. A lot of it I didn't know. So, folks, if you've got any questions, please don't forget, put them in the chat box. So we'll have time to do that at the end during the Q&A. Next, our next speaker is Jim Francis, and he is the Lake Erie Basin Coordinator for the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in the Fisheries Division. Jim is originally from St. Clair Shores and spent many hours fishing along the shores of Lake St. Clair. He has worked for federal and other Great Lakes agencies, but has been back in Southeast Michigan for the past 22 years. Jim's going to talk about the importance of fishing in Lake St. Clair, the ecosystem, and competitive angling. Jim?
Thanks, Terry. Is that coming through in full mode?
You're good.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about our fisheries resources on Lake St. Clair. You know, I've got this first slide up, and this pretty good picture of Lake St. Clair. I'm going to kind of focus on Southeast Michigan, but world-class fishing. I mean, that's in Fish Division. That's often what we refer to, providing world-class fishing opportunities in the state of Michigan. And I hope by the time I'm done with my presentation that you'll agree that we've got some outstanding resources out here on Lake St. Clair. So first off, just to talk about the general fish community. So let me start, you'll see this in a number of my slides, Scutters. It stands for St. Clair Detroit River System. And Julie talked about it in her presentation that we consider this a connecting water. We can consider this a connecting water, but we also refer to locally, we refer to Lake St. Clair as our 6th Great Lake. So, but we've got a really diverse fish community out there. Cold water species like trout and salmon, cool water species like walleye and pike, and warm water species. There's over 100 fish species in this area that use these waters, and about 45 of them use these waters for reproduction and nursery areas. So really, Julie did a good job talking about all the critical habitat down here up in the Delta and the nearshore areas. So that's part of the reason why we have such a strong fishery here. I'm going to focus on the big four, we call them. So yellow perch, walleye, smallmouth bass, and muskie. And I'll go through and just give you some highlights for each species. So yellow perch, it's our most sought after species on Lake St. Clair. And the nice thing about it is it provides both an open water and an ice fishery. And actually the ice fisheries is oftentimes more popular than the open water fishery. And the numbers vary from year to year, but on an average year, we get about 750,000 yellow perch harvested from Lake St. Clair each year. So very popular, and you know, people like catching them, and they're great eating fish too. So next is walleye. So about a third of the boat are anglers that are on Lake St. Clair target walleye. And again, it's a great table fare, so a lot of those fish get harvested for consumption. And on an average year, we'll get about 60,000 legal walleye harvested from Lake St. Clair. And just to give you some comparison, in 2015 on the Detroit River, we had 156,000 walleye that were caught, and probably similar numbers on Lake Erie as well. So you can see by adding up these numbers, it's a very significant fishery that we have down here in Southeast Michigan. Smallmouth bass is another popular species, and about 20% of the fishing traffic on Lake St. Clair is targeted towards smallmouth fishing. It kind of differs from perch and walleye in that smallmouth bass is more of a catch and release fishery. There is some harvest that goes on, but about 90% of the fish are released, and we estimate over 100,000 fish caught annually. And the other thing about bass is there's a competitive fishing tournament that target bass, and Lake St. Clair, because it's nationally renowned, it's always high up on the list. And a lot of times that's where they have their championship at Lake St. Clair in the fall. And these are big tournaments. I think last year the overall winner had a $300,000 prize and over $1 million for the whole tournament. So This is big time stuff. Muskellunge or muskie, and again, this is falls into the catch and release category. These are long-lived species, so the only way you get large specimens like this, excuse me, is through catch and release. Has high catch rates and high and good quality size fish on Lake St. Clair. You know, people often refer to muskie as the fish of 10,000 casts because it takes a long time to catch a muskie. And we're in a fortunate situation that we've got exceptional muskie fisheries on Lake St. Clair. A lot of our charter captains, you know, will have days where they can catch 10 muskie in a day, which is unheard of. I mean, it really is nationally recognized as a great resource. Let's see, Detroit River, Upper Detroit River in 2015, we had a creel survey and about 4,600 muskies were caught. So it's high density. And as you can see, it's a very diverse fishery as well. And that's what I wanted to get across with this slide is, you know, I focused on the big four, but there's also a lot of other opportunities, especially near shore. People catch bluegills and pike and rock bass and crappie. And we're also somewhat unique because Lake St. Clair is one of the few areas that has sturgeon fishing opportunities in the state of Michigan. So that's, you know, again, another long-lived species and rather unique. I've got a few data slides here. I didn't want to get too data heavy today, and I'll go through these rather quickly, but I'll kind of draw your attention to a couple of things. So this pie chart shows the percent of angler effort. So we have creel surveys where we go out and talk to anglers and find out how long they're fishing, what they're fishing for, what their catch rates were, and so we can keep track of our fisheries. So I want to draw your attention to, all right, is my mouse showing up on the screen? All right, thank you. So I'll draw your attention to the red slice here, which is Lake St. Clair, and the dark blue slice here, which is Lake Erie. So about 15% each, about a third of the Great Lakes. And again, this is where I'm classifying Lake Erie. I'm putting it as its own Great Lake. So about a third of the Great Lakes fishing effort takes place between Lake Erie and Lake St. Clair. We see a very disproportionate catch though. So 55% of the catch is from Lake Erie and 16% in Lake St. Clair. So again, you compare those to the other Great Lakes, we've got very high catch rates down here in Southeast Michigan. And that's what this slide shows. It shows the number of fish per angler hour. So it's a measure of catch rate. And as you can see from the previous slide, I mean, Lake Erie shows up really strong, about 4 fish per hour, and Lake St. Clair is right behind it, and anywhere from 50 to 100% higher than what we see in the other Great Lakes, Michigan, Huron, and Superior. So it just shows that we've got some really quality fisheries down here in Southeast Michigan. And I think this one really drives it home. And so if you think about Lake Michigan, it's a huge lake versus Lake St. Clair. It's a relatively smaller lake. And again, going back to what Julie talked about earlier, Michigan's portion of it is only a section of it because the other side is in Canada. So if we look at Michigan waters of Lake St. Clair, so what I'm doing is showing you the catch divided by the surface acre of the lakes. So we had high catch in a small lake in Lake St. Clair. So about 23 angler hours per acre on Lake St. Clair versus Lake Michigan, you're at about 0.4 angler hours per acre. So very intense fishery. And that goes back to it's a quality fishery in just the location. It's in an urban setting as well. But that means that kind of we'd like to brag a little bit because Lake St. Clair has 60 times more fishing pressure than Lake Michigan. So again, we that's part of the reason why we consider Lake St. Clair one of our Great Lakes. And we've also got other opportunities as well. We've got very good shore fishing, and again, talking about the scutters, the St. Clair Detroit River system. We've got good shore fishing opportunities. This is the wall up in the St. Clair River. Shows good opportunity for people to get out and take advantage of the resources. And again, it's very productive fisheries as well. kind of sum it up, I mean, we've got a lot of people down here in Southeast Michigan, but we're very fortunate because we have a lot of access as well. We've got various public boat launches. We've got private and municipal marinas. So a lot of access, and this might kind of lead into the next talk about boating, but lots of good opportunities to get out there and take advantage of the resources. This is really important. I really like to drive this point home. No stocking. I mean, when we look at the other Great Lakes, Lake Huron and Lake Michigan, all of those fisheries are being driven by our state stocking program, primarily trout and salmon. We have this fantastic fishery down here in Southeast Michigan, and we don't do any stocking. I mean, that's significant because we spend millions of dollars to produce fish to stock both in the other Great Lakes and in our inland waters. And because we have such good quality habitat down here and diverse habitat, the fish basically do it on their own. So that's great. And plenty of food resources out there. And if you spend any time out there, there's a lot of weed beds as well. So good habitat, and it's so kind of take home message there too, is that's why we need to protect that habitat and that water quality, because they do support important fisheries. So I'll wrap it up here, just kind of looking at, the overall fisheries on Lake St. Clair really provide a number of social and economic benefits to area residents. First off, it provides food opportunities. As I said, talk to most anglers, and yellow perch and walleye are some of the most coveted fish out there. It's a lot of local area restaurants have fish fries, so provides a good source of protein. The financial side of it, it's an economic driver for local economies. The last time we calculated our numbers back in 2004, it was a greater than $36 million benefit to local areas. The other part of it is it's fun. It's good relaxation. We talk about the quality of life. I mean, we live down here in a very urban environment, and to have access to these types of opportunities is kind of unique. So, and then there's also ecological benefits of, I kind of touched on it before, about having a healthy fish community. So I'll throw my last slide up here, has my contact information, and I think we're going to hold questions till the end. So I'll turn it back to you, Terry.
Great, thank you, Jim. Our final speaker today is Amanda Wendecker, and she is the Vice President of Marketing at the Michigan Boating Industries Association. She is in charge of messaging and initiatives to advance, promote, and protect the recreational boating industry in Michigan. The MBIA is a network of more than 350 businesses, a full-time lobbying firm in Lansing. It produces 3 large consumer shows and hosts a website and social media channels communicating with recreational boaters. MBIA also administers an educational foundation and the Michigan Clean Marina program. Amanda has worked for the association since 2008 and is a graduate of Central Michigan University. She is a lifelong boater and currently resides on an island in a lake in Oakland County, where she enjoys water sports and boating with her husband and 2 children. And Amanda is going to talk about the boating and its economic impact. She's going to talk about Clean Marinas initiative and also invasive species. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And it sounds better than it was. I live on an inland lake, not an island. But thank you for that introduction. I appreciate being here today. Like she said, I'm Amanda Wendecker with the Michigan Boating Industries Association. We are the statewide nonprofit association for the recreational boating industry, and we have about 350 members in our state. We produce 3 boat shows, including the Detroit Boat Show at TCF Center, Novi Boat Show at the Suburban Collection Showplace, and the Metro Boat Show over at the Lake St. Clair Metro Park, as well as an annual educational conference for our members, aptly named the Recreational Boating Educational Conference. And we also manage the 2 foundations that she mentioned, the Recreational Boating Industries Educational Foundation that provides scholarships to those interested in joining the marine industry, as well as continued education scholarships for those already in our industry. And lastly, the Michigan Clean Marina program, which I will talk more about in a little bit. MBIA was founded in 1958 by a group of marina and dealer principals with the mission to advance, promote, and protect boating in our state, and that remains our mission today, more than 50 years later. Here's a beautiful image of the Metro Boat Show out at Lake St. Clair from a couple of years ago. We were unable to host the show in 2020, but if you're able to join us, we do plan on hosting the event this year in September. The boating industry is thriving in Michigan, seeing it's our 11th year of consecutive growth. And during the pandemic, as with all outdoor recreation, there was a desire to recreate safely, and boating came to the forefront with hundreds of new boaters coming to the lakes. An initiative moving forward for us and for all outdoor recreation is to keep these people in the outdoors, and for us that means boating. Michigan is the third largest marine market in the country, with more than $1.3 billion in new boat, motor, trailer, and accessory sales in 2020. And we are now the second in the country for registered boats, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, with 1 million registered boats in Michigan. Boating has a $7.8 billion economic impact on our economy each year and supports more than 40,000 jobs and 1,500 businesses. It's safe to say that boating is big business in Michigan. Nearly 50% of the state's population goes on the water each year for boating and fishing. Here's another marina picture out at Safe Harbor Belmere. Nationally, the BEA has said that outdoor recreation represents 2.2% of the GDP. And while this seems like a very small number, it is high. And we're higher than things like mining, legal service, and agriculture. And in outdoor recreation, boating is among the largest contributors. Also, a study from the Michigan Port Collaborative says that Michigan harbors represent a $19 billion economic impact on our state. Taking a local look at Macomb County and Lake St. Clair, there are 45,000 registered boats in Macomb County, which is third in the state behind Oakland and Wayne. There are 200 businesses and 2,264 jobs in the industry, according to the National Marine Manufacturers Association. We like to call Lake St. Clair the heart of the Great Lakes because when you look at it from over above and turn your head a little bit, it looks like a heart. Lake St. Clair has been named by Bassmaster as the best bass fishery in the world, in the United States, and some people say the world, as mentioned before. And it is home to many world-class fishing tournaments and world records for the fish caught in the lake. Restaurants, marinas, parks, fishing charters, and other related businesses around the lake have a huge economic impact on the communities that they're in. Also in Macomb County is a new marine tech training program that just started last year at Macomb Community College. This program was brought together by an important consortium of representatives from the industry, Macomb County, MBIA, and other important partners. This is an important step with a big initiative for our industry to build a workforce. We're in desperate need of technicians and to replace the current aging technicians who want to retire. It's a couple more pictures outside on a busy Sunday off Macrae Harbor. And while the boating industry is thriving, we're not without our challenges. As mentioned before, the high water levels have caused a lot of damage to shoreline, homes, marinas, docks, more. Thankfully, they are receding this year, but a lot of damage has already been done. Right now, we're having a supply chain management as seen in a lot of other industries, and the demand for boats is outweighing the supply. So again, supply chain is stalling manufacturers, and dealers cannot keep enough inventory because of the rate at which boats are selling. Again, good problem to have, but as seen across other industries. Increased export tariffs for boat manufacturers in the United States are going to be doubling from 25 to 50%, and this will have an ongoing trickle-down effect on pricing. With the influx on new boaters and growing number of paddlecraft, the number of access sites cannot support the number of people who want to be on the water. And we do have 1,300 existing sites, which is incredible and a great resource. But infrastructure is aging, so that funding is something we're also going to be working on. With the increase of new boaters, did see an increase in accident and fatalities last year. MBIA has many safety and education initiatives to communicate the rules of the water and the need for obtaining a boater safety certificate to consumers. We all know that education is our best tool to combat this increase and keep people safe. As travel restrictions ease, sports ramp up, and people's schedules get busier as the pandemic slows, we have to fight to keep people in boating, like I said earlier. And like I mentioned, the workforce shortage has been increasing with the number of boats increasing on the water. Switching gears, I'll talk a little bit about invasive species that affect boaters and can impact our ecosystem and entire communities, also the economy because of the disruption they can cause. Luckily, Asian carp have not infiltrated the Great Lakes yet. If this were to happen, it would be devastating to our industry and the fisheries. If you haven't seen what these are, they're large carp fish that literally jump out of the water. They can jump into boats, hit people, would destroy water sports. Work is being done at the state and national level to keep these fish out of the Great Lakes. There is currently a mesh electronic barrier located near Chicago, keeping them from entering. Zebra mussels. This species was introduced to Lake St. Clair in the 80s, and they spread rapidly. They filter water, taking away important food and nutrients from other species. The sheer number of zebra mussels in combination with their feeding habits have had a profound impact on the Great Lakes and the hundreds of inland lakes that they have infiltrated. Phragmites is a reed plant that grows in very dense patches and can affect and sometimes eliminate native vegetation and wildlife, and also inhibit travel from humans and animals where it grows. It can also be a fire hazard to residents if it gets very dry. We all have an environmental responsibility when it comes to keeping our waters clean. And one of the main initiatives across the country to negate the spread of invasive species is the Clean, Drain, Dry campaign. When trailering and moving a boat, be sure that all visible plants, animals, fish, and mud are removed from the vessel and properly disposed. Drain all the water from the bilge, ballast tanks, and other locations before leaving the launch. And dry if you're able, allowing 5 days before entering another body of water. Other ways a boater can be responsible is to reduce, recycle, and contain your trash, prevent and clean up any gas or oil spills, properly handle sewage and cleaning supplies, and follow all best practices to keep our water safe for generations to come. Boating is a heritage sport that is often passed down from generation to generation, and these habits are important for the future, and boaters know this. The environmental responsibilities of dealers in marinas include educating and encouraging customers to practice the clean, drain, dry. Marinas and dealers can also be drop-off center for shrink wrap recycling with a program with Dr. Shrink and local recycling centers around the state. And marinas can become certified clean marinas, which I will talk more about in a minute. MBIA, as the state association, facilitates the Clean Marina program, the shrink wrap recycling program, and we work to educate boaters through consumer communications and through public relations. We've created infographics and share the rules of the water. We also have a full-time lobbying firm in Lansing, and we lobby for aquatic invasive species funding in Lansing as well as in DC. And going to the top level, manufacturers also have made environmental strides by adjusting boat design so that very little water is left in or on a vessel when it leaves the water to reduce the transfer and potentially aquatic invasive species from one body of water to another. Towboat manufacturers have pledged to make an engine flush hose to their boats as standard equipment beginning in 2021. The manufacturers know that increased convenience equals increased implementation. Clean water is the best interest of all the levels here, so we are all doing our part to keep the waters clean and stop the spread of invasive species. I'll wrap up today by telling you more about the Michigan Clean Marina program. In Michigan, our program was established in 2001 as a partnership between MBIA, Michigan Sea Grant, NOAA, Eagle, and the Michigan DNR. To date, more than 85 marinas have been certified and maintain their certification. Our goal is to exceed 100 marinas. The Clean Marina program provides boater resources on best practices for environmental stewardship. We promote the program to media across the state and help protect Michigan waters. There are also successful Clean Marina programs around the Great Lakes and other states that we coordinate with. The benefits of clean marina are reduced waste disposal, reducing pollution, improving water quality, protecting fish and wildlife habitats, enhancing public image, and promoting environmentally sound practices. It's not hard for a marina to become a certified marina. The steps to certification include training with a specialist, a checklist that's standard across marinas, a site visit, and approval from the board after approving their documentation. And marinas do recertify every 3 to 5 years in order to maintain their certification and stay in the program. Like I mentioned, our goal is to increase the number of marinas in the program and also increase awareness and best practices. The younger generation right now is known for being more environmentally conscious than those in the past. So we see this as an important initiative to maintain and grow upon, as boaters should be looking to patronize at a clean marina. That's all for me today. I wish I could say we had better boating weather and that I wasn't wearing this big sweater, but I'll hope to see you on the water soon. Thank you, and my contact information is here if you have any questions.
There we go. There we go. I'm having internet issues, so can you all hear me?
Yes.
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 Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me just check. We had a couple of questions. Come on. I'm assuming that this is, come on, I cannot get it to show me.
You're really broken up. We're not necessarily hearing you. Maybe if you shut off your video.
I tried that already, but I can do it again. Yeah. Okay, any special considerations, concerns about Harson's Island? A lot of history and a lot of low-lying areas. Does the island have anything of special or significant
I'll finish off that question for Terry. Does the island have anything of special or significant concern or history? I'm sure maybe Jerry wants to take this one.
Well, sure. Harson's Island is one of the major islands in the flats. We call it the flats, which is basically that large delta, freshwater delta from the St. Clair River as it flows into Lake St. Clair. It's very significant area for fish hatcheries and for birding, for the ecology of our region. This area that Julie, maybe she could respond to this as well. The Huron to Erie corridor is a very unique ecosystem, and a good proportion of those things found in our system are right there in Harson's Island. I will say that it's probably one of the most inundated areas with invasive species and Phragmites, and it has really completely altered the ecology of that island. There's areas, and there's a CISMA, Collective Invasive Species Management Program, that's now in place through the Lake St. Clair cluster, which includes Macomb and St. Clair counties, in which they are beginning to address these issues at a more wholesale approach versus just a piecemeal approach. However, it's a big task, but it is underway. It's also a fire hazard and a safety hazard for the channels and the boats. It's a very heavily used boating area. And when you don't have clearance and you're on a boat and you don't see another vehicle, vessel coming, there's a lot of other things associated with it. Those are probably some of the bigger issues. I don't know, Julie, is there anything you want to add to that?
I don't know, I think you touched on a lot of it. There's probably, it's such a long history there of how people settled or built their homes. It was all bottomlands, wetlands, that a lot of it's filled in marsh. And so I don't know if the question was about, you know, settlements, or I know there's a golf course or something underwater there. So there probably would be some structures and things there in terms of submerged things, but the whole, just a real interesting history there from the time, you know, settlers were going in there. It basically was, you know, they didn't have title to the land. They just built little islands around their houses and established their site there. So it's kind of interesting, but yeah, habitat wise and what wildlife is seen as a big part of what you do see in the Delta there. So yeah, I guess I wasn't sure what the question was, but I think Jerry did cover a lot of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I have one that just came in for Deanna. It says, when the ice jam occurred in February on the St. Clair River, how or who determined, oh my gosh, hold on, something happened. How or who determined the use of Coast Guard ships to break the ice? It appeared to be a well-coordinated effort using both Canadian and US Coast Guards. Awesome to watch.
Yeah, great question, observation there. So when the ice jams developed in the St. Clair River, us at the Corps, you know, our hydraulics and hydrology office, our emergency management staff, as well as staff from Coast Guard on both sides of the border, US and Canada, as well as emergency managers and within those counties there along the St. Clair River, were involved in really a daily briefing to help, you know, understand where conditions were that day and what needed to be done. So during those situations, you know, we do support those daily briefings and to help, you know, best. And, you know, as this thing went on, we would, meet every other day or as things improved. But yeah, definitely is a big coordinated effort on both sides.
Thanks, Deanna. I know Jim answered it in the chat, but Jim, do you want to answer the one from Ava? Can you talk about the history of Lake Whitefish in the Detroit River?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, very interesting. I mean, we had large populations of fish in Lake Erie. So, I talked about the connecting channels. Fish migrate. So these fish move all over the place. We've got walleye that spawn down in Lake Erie that go all the way up to Saginaw Bay and Lake Huron. So fish move through this corridor on a regular basis. And in the early 1900s, we had populations of lake whitefish that would come up and spawn in the southern part of Lake St. Clair. So very, very common for them to move up there. Combination of habitat loss and water quality changes over time, though, really, and commercial fishing, overfishing played a factor as well. So a number of causes really diminish those populations. The good news is now that we're starting to see improvements in water quality, a number of good habitat projects going on in the Detroit River and other places, it's really helped kind of rebuild those populations. And lake sturgeon's a good example. It seems like they're starting to slowly come back. The problem is it's a very long-lived species, so it's a long-term time frame to get it to recover. But and again, I just put my plug in. That's why I really think it's important to protect habitat and water quality, because that's people want, whether you're talking about boating out there or fishing or using the resources, you need clean water.
Definitely. All right. If there were no other questions in the chat, so I will give it over to Miss Karen, but we again, just thank every presenter, really interesting information, and to break up our day. We really appreciate you guys and all what you guys shared, and your photos were awesome too. Karen, you're still muted.
So sorry. Thanks, Julie. Just want to thank Julie and Deanna and Jerry and Jim and Amanda and Terry. There was so much information shared in such a short period of time, and your presentations and your slides and everything were great. So thank you. And thank you to all the participants for joining us today. It's always very, very wonderful to see everybody have an interest in some of the things that are so important in our community. Our next session is going to be held on May 20th, and that's going to be another informational session focusing on education. And of course, with COVID, you know, the education system has been affected dramatically. And so we're going to learn about what the educators and the education system has gone through in the last year, some of their accomplishments, some of their challenges, and kind of what to expect going forward. And we have Jim Sawyer, the president of Macomb Community College, and Alicia Fly from the Macomb Intermediate School District will be two of our presenters. You can sign up for that on our website, leadershipmacomb.org. And I want to thank everyone again. Happy Mother's Day. And we'll hope to see you again on May 20th for our next session. Thank you.